I'm being reminded of the very early stories that I heard when I came to work at the Ban Righ Foundation, as it was called then. It seems that there were fewer students at Queen's, and it seemed almost ludicrous to the current students to know that there were no residences for men in the early days, and there were very few women. But the women lived in two houses that they called the hen coops. And they had such a glorious time at Queen's that they decided amongst them that it would be a good idea to opt for a residence for the women on the campus. By 1925, the women, probably through the Ban Righ board, had managed to raise enough money to build Ban Righ Hall. And having built it, they ran it themselves, and ran it evidently very efficiently, and managed to collect a good amount of residual funds. The women jealously guarded the money that they had been accumulated through the establishment of the Ban Righ Hall, and the amount was $359,000. The women didn't want the university just to abscond with that money and put up men's residences. So they began to hatch this scheme, a project for continuing education for women who might never have been to university, more mature women than the normal student, or women who had been there and wanted to come back and continue their education. And the place simply wouldn't be here, however, if it hadn't been for the scheming of people like Helen Anderson and Bonnie Judge and Gladys Heinz and some of these others who met together and came up with this idea and presented it to Dr. John Deutsch, who was the principal at the time, and he, along with the Dean of Women at the time, Evelyn Reed, supported the whole idea, and it eventually came into being in 1974.
When I put that idea out, there were a couple people thought, hey, that'd be great, so they picked up on it too, and then it progressed from there. But it was at an alumni meeting, AEs, that is, the summer after I suggested it, and everybody seemed to think that was okay, and then I took it to the Ban Righ board, and Dr. Deutsch liked the idea. He was our chairman, and so it kind of went from there. And Bonnie Judge, who has been so major, really, to do with the center, and her husband was wonderful. So they were having this big dinner party in Toronto and invited my husband and me to go to it, and we were really plotting all that evening what we would do to get this idea across. So I think the big thing was Dr. Deutsch thought it was great and kind of allowed it to happen with a proper committee. So when he suggested a committee to look into it further, he then turned to Dr. Royce, Jean Royce, and asked her to chair it. She was ideal for that. She'd been an administrator all her life. And she had all the administrative ability to get things going. Took a lot, and she did that really very well, So that was really getting it set up, and I would think that was the hardest part in a way. Margaret Huey, at that point, she had come on. She was still the secretary to the principal. So I'll never forget, it was quite funny. On behalf of Ban Righ Centre, she wrote a letter to the principal asking for clarification about the building, that we'd heard there were rumors of this and that, and she wanted this clarified. And then, as secretary to the principal, she wrote us back and said, no, this is all right, you can have this building. It was lovely. So we had our building, and I still think we're unbelievably lucky to have been given that building. It still looks very clear in my mind exactly what I wanted to do, and I think it's what it did do, and it was just to be a place that women could gather to bolster each other's morale, because in my day, in particular, that was a very lonely place. There weren't people going back, really, like that, and a lot of talent that wasn't really being used. So I felt that if they just had some place that they could gather to get a bit of support from each other. And I didn't picture it as being a teaching place, but it was a support center, really. Myself and my friends, not one of us had jobs outside the home, in those days. Our husbands had their jobs. They didn't have a problem. And not only that, but men, time and again, would be sent by their companies to have some extra instructions or whatever, That was quite common then. Nothing for women. I mean, you just couldn't go back to university unless you could afford somebody to take over for you. And wouldn't it be lonely? I think it would have been kind of grim all by yourself, It's not just all the women coming into university, it's women with children.
The women worked so hard and they were so very much involved, and they really scraped and begged and cajoled, and they were very hopeful. I'm sure they had some reservations about whether the big residence board were going to handle things in quite so personal a fashion. But it did live on, obviously. Yeah. There was a very significant change in our social fabric between my time on the campus, which was 1948, and I think we could generalize and say most of the women at that time were comfortably middle class, and they were going to get a little education, they were going to get married and have a family and never work. Perhaps might want to teach or something like that. If we then take a jump into the 70s, this is a very significant and very changed time. You had young mothers who were struggling. Sometimes they'd bring their little ones in. You had a lot of young women who were on student loans and struggling. It was a new day. You still had your typical middle class, but there was another group coming in, a significant group, and they were serious about an education and striving. And Ban Righ has just been a godsend for those women. But the need was certainly there. The need was greater, I think, very much greater. That's probably the most important thing I could say, was that the need increased. There was no divorce in those days. And now, of course, it's a very different story. There really was a sisterhood, and we kept in touch. So that's good to know. Oh, the kitchen. We had one board member, Helen Anderson, who just started to agitate and fundraise and nag. And as a result, finally, the kitchen was modernized with dishwasher and better facilities. And it's named after her, Helen Anderson's kitchen, which is nice.
I came to Queens in the 50s, and there was no such thing really as continuing education. Everybody I came down with from my high school was out of grade 13, fathers paying the way. We didn't have to earn a nickel. When we wanted to earn, we did. The summers we could get paid, and there were lots of jobs in the summer, and you were almost guaranteed a job when you came out. Nobody thought about unemployment, and yet we didn't think of unemployment because most of us got married. And education, continuing education, was the farthest thing from our minds. And because women are the child bearers and the caregivers, not only for the babies and the young children, but for elderly parents. That was our role in life. And that was one of the main challenges to women for continuing education. And there were very few women postgraduate students. It's really amazing, the executive summary of the report of the Principal's Commission on Mental Health. When I read the recommendations for mental health and wellness, I read that they are all being carried out by the Ban Righ Foundation. It's a place where they can come and be understood and be listened to and be helped. It's a home with people who care. And I got advice that I couldn't have got anywhere else. Women will continue to bear the babies and continue to rear the children and have the major responsibility for other members of the family, and that won't change. But if other situations change, then I think the center can see it coming and be prepared. And that's why I think that the Ban Righ Centre is very important.
I was a graduate in 1964. At that point, you got married and you started having your family. I really knew nothing at all about the history that women had played in early formation of Queens and the residences and the Alumni Association. It wasn't until 1979 when I was going to a local Mississauga Oakville club. It was just the alumni group that we got together once a year. And there was the president at that point of the alumni, Glenna Lorimer, and she invited me to be a counselor on the Alumni Association. Great excitement because my son was, getting a little older and I was able to get away for their meetings. So it was just through this membership that I really got to know the role that women had played in the birth of residences at Queen's. The birth of the Ban Righ Centre was in 1974, so that was 5 years prior to my being invited to join this wonderful sort of group of Queen's women. I knew nothing about the Ban Righ Centre until in 1979 when I was involved on the actual Alumni Association. So at that point, it just awakened that quest for knowledge and just to read and to learn about the history. I was just nursing, and I felt as if I was just a nurse. By meeting all these fascinating people that I was meeting through the council and, through my son's acquaintances, I thought, I'd love to come back here to study. I looked into the different programs and found out that there was a master's, that I could take a master's in public admin with focusing on health, and I thought, this would be excellent for me at my stage of the game. I was 50 years old at that point. But I thought I was a single mom, still had my son in university, and I thought, oh boy, I don't think I could really afford to do it. Being in the presence of all of these wonderful women, and I thought, I want to be able to do something for some other older women because I was so fortunate, just so fortunate, having met Dr. Jean Hill, because I may never have done it. So I wanted to give back. I wanted to give back, and I think that's what's so important in this day and age.
My life put me in extreme crises. Academic crises, financial crises, personal crises, and they helped with each of those. They got me through a situation where I was really literally at the end and would have lost my degree. It's not just that people come here and get a warm lunch and there's someone nice. You're coming from a different space, or you're older, or school is stressful because you've been away for a while. So many different people with different stresses and problems that just coming here and having a space where people say, oh, hi, Susie, how are you doing today, can be as life-saving as the sort of concrete crisis management that they provided to me. For most people, I think it's a place on campus where people can go, and whether you're in crisis or whether you're just looking for fellowship or a quiet place to hide out, it's the perfect place. It's like a home. You walk in the door, the staff is just immediately right there saying, hi, how are you? What's going on?
Being on campus, walking around during Frosh Week, I felt really great in that this is a new adventure for me and I'm moving on to the next stage of my life. But at the same time, I kind of felt a little sad that I wasn't part of it. As I was trying to familiarize myself with the campus, I noticed the Ban Righ sign outside and it said for women. So I figured I would just pop in and just see what it was all about. Lisa was at the door and greeted me and explained to me that the Ban Righ Centre was for women that are coming back to school, and a place kind of like a refuge, a place to study, a place to meet other women who are in the same kind of situation, returning to school, and mentioning the studying resources, the presentations and guest lectures and speakers that they have here weekly, free soup, and even a quiet place to use our computers without the hustle and bustle of the libraries, and even a nap room upstairs. At the time, I thought I would never use it, but I have used it, so twice. It felt really good knowing that this place was going to be here for me as I began my adventure. The staff and the building. The staff is phenomenal. They're non-judgmental. They're unintrusive. It doesn't feel industrialized, and it's comfy and it's cozy, and I could lounge out like I would at home, so it feels familiar and it feels safe. Here, I can recline on a sofa, pop my feet up, and just chill.
I am a PhD student studying in history at Queen's University for 1 year in an exchange program. I have 2 children. My girl is 3.5. My boy is 1 year old. In order to concentrate on my study, I have left them in China. It is really hard for a mother like me to do this. Especially this is my first winter in Canada. I am so glad that I came to Ban Righ Centre when I arrived here. I consider Ban Righ Centre as the home of mine in Canada. Every time when I step in the beautiful house of the Ban Righ Centre, I feel I am at home. The staff here are very helpful and friendly. They give me a lot of encouragement on my study, and they give me a lot of care in my personal life. And I make friends with several mature students who have children as well in this center during the soup time. I'm very happy to be here, and I hope that there will be a center like the Ban Righ Centre supporting the mature student to continue the study and education in China. I have to say the Ban Righ Centre means a lot to me, and it helped me in achieving my academic goals at Queen's University.